Faith, gunpowder, and steel, the three ingredients that make the Empire great. Of course, powerhouse economy, access to most types of magic, and steam-belching monstrosities never hurt anybody either. We jump into the first of the series of tutorials covering the various factions of Total War Warhammer and how to play them in Grand Campaign, by starting out with the core faction of Empire, led by the greatest statesman of the Old World, Karl Franz. The Emperor can provide your armies with a solid campaign movement range bonus of 5%, as well as reducing the upkeep of Reichsguard and Greatswords by 10%, making it easier to field all of your late-game Empire armies. His starting units of halberdiers, handguns, and Reichsguard are all very potent and can greatly ease the battles against poorly armed and armored Empire, Greenskin, and Beastman armies that you will face in the early game. Of course, Karl Franz is no pushover himself and can handily take on most enemy lords in single combat. Next up, we have the Patriarch Balthazar Gelt, whose amazing voice almost covers up the fact that he fields one of the worst lords of magic and can't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. Fortunately, not all is lost, as the bonus to armor he provides can be immensely beneficial to early game Empire infantry, and the ability to field more battle wizards can never be understated. His starting units of greatswords, mortars, and outriders are all very powerful, and it most likely consist of the strongest starting lineup of the three Empire legendary lords. Finally, we have the religious fanatic himself, Volkmar the Grim, bringing hefty damage bonuses to his flagellants, as well as reduction in their upkeep. While not as tanky as Reichsguard, Knights of the Blazing Sun can deal immense damage when cycle charged, and are a unit otherwise inaccessible without the Conquest of Talabheim. The Tattersouls and the Flagellants provide a strong, unbreakable frontline anvil to the Hammer of Knights, making Volkmar's army a force to be reckoned with. So without further ado, let us summon the Elector Counts and jump into the fray as Empire of Man. Located in the heart of the Old World, the Empire is one of the most well-rounded factions in all of Total War Warhammer. Many of its strengths also happen to result in its weaknesses, and things such as position, gimmicks, and other such factors all play a role in making the Empire one of the most well-balanced and most flexible factions in the entire game. As we go through, their strengths are, first and foremost, they're very well-rounded and cost-efficient unit roster. The vast majority of their units are useful and will serve some sort of function, no matter what tier they are at. They also have one of the strongest economies in the game. Although their home base economy is not necessarily comparable to the sheer power Bretonnia can deliver, they are not entirely trade reliant, and they certainly can't compare in rating and looting to something like, say, Greenskins or the Horde factions. They can perform all of these various they can take advantage of all of these various sources of income, making them a very, very powerful economic faction, especially when stacked together with their army's cost efficiency and very low upkeeps. Furthermore, they have very strong lords with very strong skill selection, allowing them to become very powerful individual fighters, support characters, army buff units, or simply good on a strategic grand scale. They also have very good technology, with access to upgrades for all their units, as well as reductions in upkeep, improvements in income, and global improvements to things such as public order and reductions in corruption. Also, they have very good and varied heroes. Most of their heroes, all of their heroes serve some sort of function. They have 4 different hero types, each of which can somehow help you build up your empire on a grand scale, and most of which can help you in direct combat. Their mages are one of the most varied units in the unit selection. Have one of the most varied unit types in the game, with several different lords of magic being available, including the Empire unique as of now, Lore of Light. This may change in the upcoming release of Warhammer 2, but as of now, that is definitely the case, and Empire is definitely the most well-versed faction as far as magic is concerned. The Empire also has a wide variety of unique structures, spaced out across its breadth and width, all the way from the Wasteland straight on to Talabheim and Wissenland. They can get all sorts of unique buildings that can simply boost them by a significant margin. And finally, the Empire doesn't really have any glaring problems, such as lack of growth, order, any problems with grudges or fightiness, such as dwarves or greenskins might suffer, and those sorts of issues. On the other side, many of these advantages or disadvantages can become disadvantages for Empire. Uh, just like they lack a real significant problem, they also lack a real gimmick, such as WAs, specific units being incredibly powerful, or specific unit classes being particularly powerful, with their possible exception of their cavalry, and they don't have their economy, while very strong overall, is not outstanding in any one specific aspect, though definitely perhaps above average. Um, they also have some weaker infantry, which can be a bit of a letdown in later game situations. And their starting location, being so central, while beneficial for trade and expansion, can be a massive issue when discussing how to defend it. Furthermore, they're a very expensive faction to level up, especially to reach a state where you can recruit all their varied units, whether that be artillery, infantry, cavalry, or heroes. And this can definitely make it a bit of a challenge to take advantage of all the Empire's tech and all the opportunities it can offer. The fact that they are also the bulwark of the North will also make it very difficult. Can also make it very difficult to build up, as you will constantly be dealing with chaos and pressure from Varg and scaling, as well as the later Chaos Invasion and Warhorde of Chaos that will strike in towards the Empire. It can also be a bit hard to, going off the issue of teching up, it can also be hard to gain unique structures. They're generally not in your starting province of Altdorf or starting province of Reichland, and you will have to expand to other provinces to get access to unique sorts of structures. So, with strengths and weaknesses out of the way, let us discuss the Empire's early game. First and foremost, I think it is important to differentiate the builds you will be running for your initial army. If you are running Karl Franz, it is generally advantageous or Balthasar Gelt, it is generally advantageous to build your army around swordsmen and crossbows, prioritizing initially swordsmen and then switching over to crossbows once your rally field or training field has upgraded to a rally field. If you are playing as Volkmar, however, this is a bit different, as flagellants are definitely a much more staple unit, and thus you will want to start off with Free Company Militia to rapidly build up a short-range skirmish contingent, followed up by transferring into flagellants for the bulk of your close quarters army. When you strike out, your first goal should be to occupy all of Reichland, as this is your main province, and it will allow you to get a significant amount of income, as well as providing you with plenty of opportunities for expansion and build up. Do make sure to retain your cowpens in Grunberg, and make sure to retain the training field available in Helmgart that the AI has built there. Simply occupy them. Do not sack, as you do not want to be dealing with too many uprisings. Shortly after you occupy all of Reichland, you will be facing pressure from both the west, from the Skull Smashers, and the Beastmen from the south. And this is definitely something you want to be prepared for. Once you've built up a training field in Helmgart, make sure to scrap the one that you have available in Altdorf, so that you can open up slots for higher end buildings. The Empire follows much the same rules that I described in the basics video of building up walls and income buildings in all your settlements as a bit of a priority. You will definitely want walls in every single one of your settlements, and of course an income building in every single one of your settlements. Though early on, you will want to retain that growth building in Grunberg and the barracks or the rally field, such training field in Helmgart, and build your income buildings at a later stage. Do keep in mind that Grunberg is a relatively safe location, and as such should be the lowest priority for walls. Your faction objectives for Empire are pretty simple, albeit not easy to achieve. Always easy to achieve. You need to unify all of the Empire, conquering everything from Marienburg all the way out to Ostermark, and everything up from Nordland all the way down to Wissenland in the south. Thus unifying the Empire. And on top of that, you need to crush the vampire counts and take both Eastern and Western Sylvania. Finally, much like most of the basic factions' objectives, you need to defeat and push back Chaos and the Warhorde of Chaos into the Chaos Wastes. These are fairly straightforward, but potentially very tedious objectives, and they can be difficult to achieve, especially earlier into the game. Early game, if you're playing on higher difficulties, your priority should always be for leadership, as Empire units' leadership will suffer greatly on very hard and legendary in particular. But later if you're playing on lower difficulties, or even later on, you will want to start prioritizing other techs such as unit experience, speed, income, and those sorts of things. But leadership should definitely be an early game priority right after you take your rally field, or build a rally field in Altdorf. Early game, your lords should be focusing on gaining skills such as Lightning Strike, Quartermaster, and Logistician early on. Lightning Strike is a bit iffy, as later on you will be moving around with massive amounts of armies, but Quartermaster and Logistician are definitely crucial to simply maintain all these armies in the field at all times. Inspiring Presence will lead you into Hold the Line and Honest Steel, and Pistol Corps, all of which are absolutely crucial for lower-end Empire armies that you have available in the early tiers of the game. Finally, it is often good to mount your lords on a griffin, as this will give them a great deal of mobility and a great deal of damage output, plus the ability to terror bomb their opponents. Once you've conquered all of Reichland, you will need to strike out further. Your options are, of course, to strike out towards Marienburg, to strike out east and attempt to retake the empire there, or to strike south against Bretonnia, or the Bretonnian sub-faction of Bastogne there. I would not recommend expanding east. East will bring you into conflict with the vampires, and when you go fight the vampires, you need to go all the way to the hilt. You cannot simply expand and take, say, Confederate Stirland, and then expect to be able to slowly, over time, whittle the vampires down. Their corruption will leave you in a constant state of revolt, and make it incredibly difficult to hold on to Wertbad without Stirland or Averland or Wissenland without committing massive reserves there. Instead, I would recommend either taking Marienburg or Bastogne. Marienburg will give you massive amounts of income, although you will need to leave a house stack there to deal with any potential scaling invasion from the north. It will also allow you to mop up the Skull Smashers, thus clearing up a bit of pressure from that flank. If you go for Bretonnia, do keep in mind that most of the Bretonnian factions earlier into the game are not allied with each other or much less confederated, and so you will easily be able to exploit this to conquer a very large chunk of Bretonnia, potentially everything from Bordelot through to Paravon, Bastogne, Lyonesse, and Artois. Simply leave Bretonnia in the north as a screen against Chaos, and Carcassonne in the south as a screen against Estalia, and you should be set. The regions and provinces here can be held generally with one, maybe two army stacks, and it will provide you with a massive amount of income, provided you build a handful of control buildings there. And there's very little outside pressure that can change that. As mentioned before, early game armies should be largely centered around a mix of crossbows, swords, and spearmen. Spearmen I do find a little lackluster, as AI does not have a tendency to bring too many large units, and it is generally better to get swordsmen, as they will dish out some hurt to AI units that they bring. Of course, the finale before Chaos is final preparations and attempting to take the vampire counts. One of the recommendations I would make is crushing Skarsnik, unless he has taken all of Grey Mountains, which makes it very inconvenient. If you manage to crush Skarsnik, Carrick Nolan will usually take Carrick Asgras, and you will be given a great trading partner. The other important thing to keep in mind is that you want to keep everything that you control south of the River Reich, with the exception of Gorsel in the Wasteland. If you do this, it will be much harder for Chaos to fight you later in the game, in the later stages of the game. When you fight against the vampires, do attempt to confederate one of the Empire factions nearby to provide you with a permanent base. Otherwise, you will have to fight them and conquer them. It is also important, if you are playing as Balthazar Gelt or Volkmar, to confederate to get access to Emperor Karl Franz, as otherwise you cannot get any access to him. As mentioned before, you will have to conquer the vampires completely, entirely, and quickly. Crush them all. You will have to defeat Schwarzhofen, Tempelhof if it's still around, and the vampire counts, and you can't allow any of them to stick around because the corruption will simply make it impossible to hold on to these territories. However, the vampire territories are fairly easy to defend, as they are up against your normally dwarvish allies, and in the middle of your territory, and so they can easily be used as a base for churning out lots and lots of income. As Chaos is coming, you should make a great effort to make final preparations to your income, upgrade your armies with higher level units, and fortify any last settlements that you need to, And make sure to reinforce your diplomacy with Bretonia, with the dwarves, and with the wood elves, as you do not want them either backstabbing you, or you want to use them as a buffer against your opponents, or against chaos, most importantly. Settlements such as Isleheart, I would recommend building a Reichsfort in. If you expect a settlement to be under attack, and Isleheart is definitely the most significant of these, as it is often the crossroads of invasion, especially if you do not take your Marienburg early on. I would recommend building a Reichsfort there. The Reichsfort is an Empire Tier 3 structure that allows the recruiting of Reichsguard if you do have Blacksmith. And these are both very powerful cavalry, but they will also provide you with a stronger garrison in whatever settlement they're built in. And being Tier 3 is the perfect structure to build in a small settlement, as it doesn't need any further upgrades. So, with the early game covered, let us move on to a later game scenario. As you can see, here we are in a late game scenario where all the map has been cleared of enemies and we control everything that there is to be controlled. So as you're approaching late game with Empire, one of the things you will definitely want to start making more and more use out of is heroes. And Empire has access to 4 different types of heroes. And you may get 1 or 2 for free throughout the course of the early game. And if you do, make sure to take advantage of whatever perks they may provide to speed up your build-up or expansion or whatever it is they might help with. First and foremost is the Empire Captain, easily accessible through the barracks and easily producible in large numbers, if provided you have the money for his upkeep. The Empire Captain dishes out a lot of damage and allows you to and definitely provides a very good support tool in combat. He also can allow you to recruit higher end units with Exemplar, as well as consistently upgrading your armies that he's assigned to with Drill Master. He can upgrade slightly to Assassinate with Champion, and perhaps most importantly, he also, for the global perspective, he provides a boost to Public Order of +5, which can make it much easier to quickly expand, counteract enemy chaos corruption, reducing your order, or counteract enemy heroes who might be reducing your order, that sort of thing, if you are unable to assassinate them. Next, we do have the Warrior Priest. He can improve the growth of your regions, making it very relatively easy for Empire to build up quickly to get those walled settlements and their economy going wherever they might expand to. He's also a solid combat lord and provides a very nice variety of buffs to both himself and nearby allies, which can make him just a very, very strong option as a support combat tool. He can also improve your army's replenishment, which can be very useful if fighting long extended campaigns where you're under constant enemy pressure. Then we have the Witch Hunters, who are a fairly limited scope unit. They are not particularly useful in combat, as they struggle. Their ranged hero, they will often get obstructed, and their damage output is often mitigated due to those things. However, Witch Hunters are amazing at assassinating enemy heroes, and it is best that you have 1 or 2 of them roaming around your empire, assassinating Chaos and Vampire Lords especially, as these can greatly hurt you with their spread of Chaos or Vampire corruption, especially once the main Chaos invasion is hitting you, and you have a plethora of Chaos Sorcerers and Exalted Heroes spread all over the place, spreading their corruption. Finally, there are the Empire Wizards. With Balthazar Gelt might be the only wizard who can run Lore of Metal, but even without him, you are capable of recruiting Lore of Beasts, Lore of Life, Lore of Shadows, Lore of Fire with the Bright Wizard, Lore of Light with the Light Wizard, which is exclusive to the Empire currently, and Lore of Heavens with the Celestial Wizard. Of these lores, the ones I would suggest the most are Light Wizard, simply for the net of a Mintok, as this is a huge utility spell. The Grey Wizard, because all of his spells are useful, whether as debuffs for raw damage output or for buffing up your allies with Occam's Mind Razor, and Jade Wizard simply for his support spells, helping you protect allies as well as heal them up with things such as Earthblood. This is not to discount any of the other wizards here. Many of them are very solid. Kindle Flame can work incredibly well with Knights of the Blazing Sun, for example, and Lore of Beast wizards can be mounted on a Griffin, which can make them double up very potent, very powerfully with a Empire General to give you a crazy powerful goon squad in the air. Later game Empire armies are important. It is important to note that you will, if you invested in Pistol Corps and in Honest Steel, you will generally be taking advantage. Obviously, this is Balthazar, so he's not necessarily doing that, but you will be investing in Often be investing in honest steel and pistol core with your heroes, and this can make your baseline units as Empire very, very strong. Definitely, you will want to stiffen them up with better units. So, for example, halberdiers, heavy artillery, steam tanks, cavalry, great swords. All these are very useful units. And of course, in late game, you can also start doing some silly stuff with Empire that is actually very powerful, such as mass cavalry armies. Empire is probably one of, if not probably the best cavalry roster in the game, simply because of all the options it has for both skirmish and shock cav, which makes them probably the best army to run an all cav build, and backed up with a Lore of Beasts wizard, for example, and Empire Lord on or an Empire General on a Griffin. They can be absolutely devastating. More importantly, when building new armies as Empire, you will want to do a mix of global and local recruiting. Try to build your armies in a province where you have access to high-tier units, whether these be heavy cavalry or artillery, or perhaps high-end infantry such as greatswords. Build these high-end units locally, and because by late game you should be able to global recruit in one turn. As you can see here, if I can recruit all of my cheap units in one turn. This means that you can, while building up expensive units in whatever province you're at, you can simultaneously build up your Empire, your army's cheap units, and fodder units for your front line. And these will still continue performing very well right up to the end game, simply because of the higher veterancy and the buffs from things such as honest steel or technology are provided. Do keep in mind that when you're fighting against chaos, you want to keep fights close to fortress towns. For the Empire, if you follow my advice on defending along the River Reich, your fortress towns should be Beckhaven, Talabheim, Altdorf, Eilhart, and Marienburg/Gorsel, depending on where your opponent is striking you from, or where the Scalings and Vargs decide to attack you. All of these cities should have walls, and that you should try to invest in garrison buildings. Definitely have some, and try to bait the enemy to attack these cities, and then support them with armies to win in a rather cost-efficient manner. If these cities are leveled up, they will provide you with a garrison that's almost comparable with a full enemy stack. So definitely something you should be trying to bait your enemy into. Make use of other options. If you have very powerful elite armies, use lightning strikes to hit the chaos armies one at a time rather than being forced to engage all of them at once. Ambush can achieve the same effect if you bait your opponents near woods or areas where ambushes have a higher probability. Using overwhelming numbers can be very useful. Empire, if you have reduced your upkeep adequately and are fielding enough decent quality armies, a mix of low-end and high-end units, you can easily overwhelm your opponents with sheer numbers. Counter the enemy heroes with agents, and particularly witch hunters, and make sure you cover your rear areas with a handful of armies. These don't need to be the best of armies, but you will usually want to stack in Faldorf, and perhaps in Helmgard, or if you expand into Bretonnia, somewhere like Castle Baston, ready to respond if one of your allies or wannabe allies backstabs you. Finally, going to go over unique structures real quick for Empire. Empire does have a handful of these. First and foremost, in Altdorf, you have the Altdorf Colleges of Magic, which improves your hero recruit rank for battle wizards. In Middenland, you have two unique structures, one of which is the Middenheim Great Temple of Ulrich, which is a great buff to your anti-corruption, and greatly improves your hero recruit ranks for witch hunters and priests. And Karlberg, which gives you the Knights Panther Chapter House, which improves your garrison size, and provides you with additional unit experience and public order for cavalry units in the province, and additional public order. In Talabheim, you have the Knights of the Blazing Sun Chapter House. This is the only place you can recruit Knights of the Blazing Sun, unfortunately. Unfortunately, you will usually have demigryphs already by the time you unlock these guys, but if you do get access to them, they can be a fun unit to play around with. Definitely don't feel discouraged. In Nuln, you have the Gunnery School, and this will greatly reduce the upkeep for artillery, which is very useful, improve your unit experience by 4, and reduce recruitment costs, as you can see, for artillery on all forces, which is all very, very useful. As Empire does tend to rely on skirmishers and artillery for a lot of its damage output, and so you will generally be fielding quite a bit of artillery, and this can just be very potent. There are also a handful of non-Empire unique buildings and some economic buildings I would like to discuss. I do suppose Marienburg is Empire Empire province, and in that, Marienburg port, a very strong economic settlement. Up north in Kislev, the port of Ehrengrad is one of these great economic centers, also generating massive amounts of income and some growth in tradable resources. In Kislev, we have the Boca Palace, which I do not currently have here, but it provides, once again, a massive boost to income. Most of these structures are largely simply a boost to income rather than anything else. Then there are the gold mines of Wolfenburg. Obviously, gold mines are not necessarily unique to the Empire or any faction really in particular, but in Wolfenburg and Drakenhof, you do have access to gold mines, and this can greatly increase your income. That definitely makes conquering the vampire accounts worthwhile in the long run, simply because you will get that income boost from the gold mines. And you do actually have access to a handful of unique Bretonnian structures. The Crone tournament grounds will generate income and improve public order, as well as upgrading your cavalry recruited locally. And in Bordelot, you not only get access to the Menan's dry docks, which, while not as potent as Marienburg's docks, are still a very solid, are still superior port to generic ports. And you also get access to the Bordelot wine market built structure line, which can improve public order and produces some wine resources and some growth. So definitely not a bad structure to have, although definitely not a priority to rush for. So in short, Empire revolves around building up your economy and fortifications, making sure to reduce costs of your army in the process, as you want to keep make sure that your mix of cheap and expensive units is kept as affordable as possible when compared to your economy. Through this, you should be able to field multiple armies, usually about 6 to 8 by the time Chaos arrives. Make sure to have a decent amount of armor piercing once Chaos arrives, as that can be very powerful against most of their units, as they do tend to be armored. Of course, prioritize things that can improve your replenishment, that reduce your upkeep, that improve your units, and that can will improve your global issues or undo global issues such as corruption or public order. Make sure to utilize heroes to their fullest and use them in the correct fashion. Make sure to expand cautiously. Do not overextend, at least especially not in early game. By late game, once you have a lot of armies on the field, it may be fairly easy to expand, even at the height of the Chaos Invasion. But in early game, especially in the first 40 turns, it can be a bit difficult. And make sure to cover all your flanks. This is a bit going off the not overextending aspect, but definitely make sure not to overextend and cover all your flanks. Make sure you have some armies in the back line, even when you don't expect backstabbing from allies. So if you follow these rules, you should definitely have a fairly successful campaign as Empire. You should be able to easily beat off Chaos, which is the last real challenge in this game. Once you do so, you should be easily able to snowball and conquer the rest of the world, provided that is what you want it to do. I do hope this guide helped you all. If it did, if you enjoyed it, do leave a like or subscribe down below. If you have any suggestions on how I can improve these guides, do feel free to leave those suggestions in the comments. I'll be sure to read them as soon as I can. And respond as soon as I can. I do appreciate you all for watching. I hope this guide helped, and bye for now.